The courtroom was already thick with tension, but no one was prepared for what came next. As the prosecution tapped the speaker system and hit play, a voice echoed through the chamber, calm, composed, and unmistakably familiar. It was Diddy. Then, another voice followed, Will Smith, and a third, Meek Mill. Gasps rippled through the audience. The audio wasn't just casual talk, it was intimate, coded, and eerily revealing. In just a few minutes, everything changed. Gone were the formalities of legal argument. This was something far more raw, the kind of moment that makes headlines before the judge can even bang the gavel. No context was given, no explanation offered, just the chilling realization that the tape wasn't supposed to exist, let alone be played in front of a jury. From the defense table, Diddy's face froze. His lawyer's eyes darted, scanning the room, clearly blindsided. The energy inside the courtroom shifted like a pressure drop before a storm. Everyone knew this wasn't just evidence, this was a bombshell, and whatever came next would expose far more than anyone expected. As the audio played on, Diddy didn't speak, he didn't blink. But his silence was deafening. His jaw locked. One hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. This wasn't the expression of someone confused or surprised. It was something else. Recognition. The kind of reaction you have when a secret you buried years ago suddenly claws its way to the surface. Observers inside the courtroom described it as a shift in energy, like Diddy's entire aura cracked for a second. A man once known for controlling every room he walked into now looked like he was losing control in real time. His legal team scrambled, whispering frantically among themselves, but the damage was done. The jury had already heard what they weren't supposed to. And what made it worse? The conversation didn't sound staged. It sounded real, intimate, like three powerful men talking behind closed doors with no fear of being recorded. But they were. Somehow someone got that audio. And now, the courtroom was listening, line by line, as Diddy's carefully crafted image unraveled. The moment Will Smith's voice cut through the courtroom speakers, the energy shifted again, this time from shock to disbelief. For years, Will had carefully maintained an image of being Hollywood's golden boy, charming, clean, untouchable. But what the jury heard didn't match that image at all. His tone was relaxed, confident, but layered with something else. Familiarity. He wasn't a guest in this conversation. He was part of the inner circle. As his voice blended with Diddy's and Meek Mill's, it became clear this wasn't a one-time talk. This was routine, casual, like three men who had nothing to hide from each other, until now. What stood out most was the language, subtle, coded phrases that didn't mean much on the surface, but once you listened closely, raised too many questions. Words like keep the circle clean, and loyalty checks, and references to handlers, and rooms with rules. It was the kind of conversation that made the jury lean in and the public lean back. Outside the courthouse, Will Smith's name was already trending, not for a new movie, not for an Oscar slap. This time, it was for being caught in the center of a scandal no one saw coming, and one that could destroy everything he'd built. Just when the courtroom thought it had heard it all, Meek Mill's voice entered the mix, and it sent a ripple of unease through the room. Compared to Diddy and Will, Meek sounded more cautious, almost hesitant, but that didn't make his words any less damning. He spoke about being invited to the house again, mentioning how some of those nights got too weird and how he kept it quiet like always. He didn't sound thrilled. He sounded like someone who had been pulled into something and wasn't sure how to get out. Or worse, someone who had already seen too much. That one line, "It's not about what you saw, it's about who saw you there," hung in the air like smoke. It hinted at a hierarchy, a chain of command, and the silent consequences for stepping out of line. The prosecution let the audio play without commentary, knowing the implications were speaking louder than any statement they could make. This wasn't about one person doing something wrong. It was about a system. Quiet, powerful, and terrifyingly well hidden. And Meek? Whether he was a willing player or just another pawn didn't seem to matter anymore. His voice was there. His name was on the tape. And now, his silence outside the courtroom was speaking volumes. The deeper the court got into the audio, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a casual exchange between celebrities. It was layered, guarded, and carefully worded. Almost like they knew someone might hear it one day. almost like this was a language only a few people in the room truly understood. Phrases like "circle stays tight," "clear the room before the real talks," and "initiated, not invited" rang out with eerie precision. To the average ear, it sounded vague, but to those who had followed the whispers about Hollywood's secret gatherings and elite inner circles, it was chillingly familiar. There was a moment, barely 10 seconds long, where Diddy's voice dropped low and he said, "Once they're in, they don't leave. They just learn to shut up." That line didn't just unsettle the jury, it made the judge lean forward. It hinted at power dynamics far outside the courtroom, a world built on secrecy, compliance, and unspoken threats. Experts watching the trial said this section of the recording could be the most damaging, not because it proves criminal activity outright, but because it suggests a system built on silence and control. And in that system, words were weapons, used not to reveal, but to conceal. Whatever this circle was, it wasn't just about friendship, it was about power. And now the world was starting to decode what had been kept hidden in plain sight. The moment the word "ritual" left the speakers, the judge's face shifted. What had started as quiet listening turned into visible concern. The audio, once merely controversial, was now treading into dangerous territory, legally, culturally, and ethically. Then it happened. The gavel slammed down, cutting through the tension like a gunshot. "Court is in recess," the judge declared, voice tight, eyes scanning the room. It wasn't just to calm the gallery, it was a move of control, of damage control. The prosecution and defense teams immediately huddled, whispering urgently, but no one missed what just happened. The judge was rattled. The courtroom emptied fast. Reporters raced outside to get the story out. Lawyers ducked into corners, avoiding cameras. But the ripple effect was already in motion. This wasn't just about admissibility of evidence anymore, it was about liability, reputation, exposure. Legal analysts were quick to weigh in. If the audio was ruled admissible, it could open the floodgates for other recordings, testimonies, and sealed files to be reviewed. If it was thrown out, the public backlash could be even worse. But inside the courtroom, one thing was clear. The system had been shaken, not just by what the audio revealed, but by the fear it triggered in people who were supposed to be in control. And behind closed doors, everyone was now asking the same question: how much darker could this get? Once the courtroom reconvened, the prosecution didn't waste a second. They walked in with a new strategy and a new tone. No longer cautious, they leaned fully into what the audio had revealed, not just about Diddy, but about the entire network of influence that seemed to orbit around him. "This isn't about one incident," the lead prosecutor said. "This is about a culture, one man, and his control over it." Every word was deliberate. The jury leaned in. The courtroom, once skeptical, now looked ready to believe it. They laid out a pattern, slowly, methodically, behind-the-scenes footage, financial records, confidential messages, all meant to show one thing: that Diddy didn't just move through the industry, he built a system around himself, one where careers were made or destroyed based on loyalty, silence, and compliance. The prosecutor even hinted that Will Smith and Meek Mill weren't just associates. They were proof that even the most powerful men in Hollywood weren't immune to Diddy's reach, and in some cases, were bound by it. And then came the phrase that hit like a sledgehammer. This case isn't about one man doing bad things. It's about one man creating a world where bad things thrive, and daring anyone to speak up. The courtroom sat frozen. No objections, no whispers, just the heavy weight of realization. If what the prosecution was saying was true, then Diddy wasn't just on trial for a single act. He was the architect of a machine that had been running unchecked for years. And now, the machine was beginning to crack. By the time the defense returned to the floor, the damage was already done. The jury had heard the audio. They'd seen the expressions. They'd felt the shift. But still, Diddy's lawyers tried to spin it, urgently and almost desperately. They argued that the audio was taken out of context, that it was heavily edited, and that coded language doesn't equal criminal activity. But even as they spoke, their tone betrayed something they couldn't hide: panic. They claimed the conversation was a performance, part of a creative brainstorming session for a film project, and that Will Smith, Meek Mill, and Diddy were simply role-playing. The gallery didn't buy it. Neither did the jury, and maybe not even the judge. What truly undermined the defense wasn't what they said. It was how Diddy looked while they said it. He wasn't composed anymore. He wasn't confident. He was cracking. He avoided eye contact. His body language was stiff. Every few seconds, he would shift in his seat like he was being burned from the inside. It wasn't the posture of a man fighting false claims. It was the posture of a man watching the walls close in. And in the silence that followed the defense's final objection, it became clear. Their strategy wasn't to prove Diddy's innocence. It was to blur the lines, cast doubt, and hope no one looked too closely. But the court was already staring, and the illusion was falling apart. The trial wasn't over, but it didn't matter. The world had already rendered its verdict, and it was brutal. The moment clips of the leaked audio hit social media, it was chaos. Hashtags exploded. Memes spread like wildfire. Will Smith, Meek Mill, and Diddy were no longer just names. They were trending, dissected, and speculated about in real time across every platform. News outlets ran with headlines like "Hollywood's Hidden Circle Exposed" and "Diddy's Dark Web of Influence." Overnight, what had been a courtroom drama turned into a global spectacle. Journalists, bloggers, and influencers all dug in, connecting dots, resurfacing old rumors, and asking dangerous questions that had once lived in the shadows. Public opinion split fast. Some called the trial a necessary reckoning. Others accused it of being a witch hunt. But no one was indifferent. Everyone had an opinion. And all eyes were now locked on the courtroom like it was the final season of a long-running series with too many secrets. And through it all, the biggest question still hung in the air like smoke. If this is just the beginning, how deep does it really go? Because if Diddy's empire was built on silence, then this courtroom, this tape, might just be the sound that finally broke it.